Windows Server 2019 System Administration. Welcome back everybody. I'm Prakash Pradhan, your trainer for this entire series. In today's topic, we're going to have a brief discussion about this theoretical portion of these three important topics. That is your network load balance, failover, and failover cluster. You see, to work as a system administrator or the system admin, system engineer, or in short, to work as a system IT head in any organization, you'll have to basically you'll have to have a strong knowledge for all of these three topics actually. So I have seen many of my students who always used to have the this mixed understanding for the failover and the network load balance and the failover cluster. So actually in this video I'd like to clear out all of these doubts so that it will help you a lot. So we are going to discuss in detail about the network load balance, the failover, or the failover cluster. That means the meaning of all of these three things. So first let's discuss about the network load balance. You see, in every organization you might have any web address or any website that is being hosted. Or if I take the simple example of any cloud, let's say for Yahoo, Gmail, okay, or let's say any for this google.com, anything. Now you might have thought that if there is a server, let's say this server is your Google server, for example, okay, for instance. Now, so there are so many clients who are trying to get access over all the resources that they have stored in their server in a form of their web access. So have you ever thought that when any client from any country hits a particular server, at the same time there are many clients or the many hosts, many clients, they are going to access the same resources. Now the problem that you're going to face over here is your load. That means from any corner of the world, if there is only one server for any your web hosting, in that case all this web requests from the different client, okay, in this instance I have taken two computers. Let's say this is a computer number one. Computer number one want to hit www.abc.com, for example. At the same time, this second client also hits the same server. So right now we are having only two clients, so we might not feel any load. How about this is about 2 million users, for example. Okay, let's say 2000 users. In that case, all the requests from different computers throughout the world, the request will be sent only to one particular server where the web is being hosted actually. So there comes the existence or the necessity of your network load balance. That means whatever service that we're going to provide over here for the client over the network, okay, over the cloud, that are going to be balanced in their load. That means over here now, when the first client hits abc.com, for instance, this server, okay, now they are not going to hit all the time of same server. So what they do now, they used to enable the round robin and they go for the load balancing. That means when the client number one hit abc.com, this is the DNS for that zone. So the request will come to this DNS only actually. Okay, from any corner of the world, whoever hits the abc.com, for instance, so their request will go to their DNS where the round robin is enabled. Then actual website is not hosted over here. The website might be over here, but the similar content of that website is actually stored in some other server also. So that brings the complete concept of the implementation of your network load balance. Of course, my next video, practical video, will be on the basis of this only. So let's see now how it works. Suppose this computer from America, for example, hits this abc.com, though the website is hosted over here, but the DNS record is over here and the round robin is also enabled over here. So what happens now, when the one client from America hits this abc.com, first the request goes to the server and this server redirect that request to this particular web host server where the website is being hosted actually. So the request, it gets, accepts, and the information will pass to this server. That means this workstation or this client. Now at the same time, let's say at the same time, okay, as soon as this computer had access over the resources of this abc.com, any kind of this website, at the same time, if any other host from any other country, let's say from India, okay, this client hits the same website abc.com, now that time the request will not be sent to this server, because right now the one request from the request that was made from the one of the client of America, that request was redirected to this server number one, that's a node one. So now if second time the same request is sent by another computer, another host from the India, now at that time the request will not send to this node 1, it will be redirected to this node 2. What is the benefit? There will be proper load balancing. That means if 100 clients are there, 50 client requests will be redirected to this node 1, that means the server 1, and the next 50 requests will be sent to this server 2. So in that case, there won't be any load. Okay, so this is the actually idea of load balancing. Simple in order to share the load of your any service over the cloud platform. It can be in your internal network also. That means I mean to say it can be implemented in a local area network as well. You don't have to see this infrastructure, this implementation only for the cloud. It can be tested in your local area network also, which of course I'm going to show you in my next video. Now this is the idea for the load balancing. That means it's simple. When the client requests any service, the load will not be sent only to one computer. Of course, the DNS record is created in your zone. Over here, and it's in the primary zone, and the round robin will be enabled in your domain, and then the request will be redirected to these two different servers so that your load is in balance. That means if you have 4 computers, the first computer request will send to the server 1, second computer makes a request, it will send to the server 2, again the third computer makes a request to get access over the resources over the cloud, it will go again to computer number 1, and the fourth computer request will go to computer number 2, that means the server number 2, so that the load can be balanced easily. Another one advantage is there in order to use the network load balance. If I take the instance for the web service as a load balance, it will also do the load balancing at the same time. When the primary server goes down, your request can be redirected to the other server also. That means client will never know when the primary server went down. So it will work as a failover mechanism also. But please do make sure network load balance is not meant for your failover. Okay, the failover we'll discuss separately. Now, next on over here we are going to discuss is the additional domain or the failover. So let's talk about the failover over here, because additional domain is also used as a mechanism of your failover. Okay, if you have missed out additional domain how it works, so please see my site, visit my site. I have made a complete tutorial how the additional domain can be created and how it works. So over here when we talk about the failover, and additional domain is also a part of failover. So the main purpose of failover is that when your primary server goes down, the secondary server will take over. That means if this server 1 is my primary domain controller and these all are my client, okay, they are authenticated by your primary domain, this controller. Whatever group policies are there, all are flowing from here. But what if the primary server goes down? There comes the concept of your failover. So in that case, when the primary server goes down, the secondary server will be activated immediately. That means the first response actually goes from the primary domain, and in case if the primary domain is failed, so there is a mechanism for the failover. That's a failover. There is no clustering actually. Okay, cluster we'll discuss separately right in this video only. But right now the main purpose of failover I would like to explain to you all, because some of my students were asking me that there is still some confusion for the failover and your failover cluster along with the network load balance. So that's why I'm making this video first. Now the failover, I guess by this time you have already understood. Failover is simple a mechanism to keep one standby server. When the one server goes down, the second server will take over. Of course, there must be synchronization in between these two. That means if the one object was created in a server 1, immediately that object should be replicated in a server 2 also. Because when the primary server or the first server goes down, all the clients are going to be authenticated, all the group policies are going to be flow from this secondary server. So it's a complete failover, this mechanism. So in every organization, I do believe there must be additional domain or what we call the failover mechanism also. But we do have another one important topic over here to discuss. That's a failover cluster. Failover cluster is completely different than your network load balance and your additional domain or the failover. Actually, the failover cluster, it's some kind of your mechanism for the failover only, but the working principle that we follow over here is a bit different. If you notice over here in your additional domain or the failover, we have 2 servers. Okay, now all the resources that the clients are going to access is basically going to access from the server 1. If the server 1 goes down, they are going to get access from the server 2. That means these are the devices who is hosting all those services, and all the informations are being saved from here, and they are going to use the space from this device itself. Whereas if I talk about the failover cluster, we do not do that. Of course, the failover is also using a mechanism for your failover itself, because see, it is made from the two words, failover and the cluster. Okay, now we are going to see the meaning of cluster. Failover is already explained. When the one server goes down, another server will take over and the service will go on. Okay, now when we talk about the failover cluster, please try to understand. Failover cluster means actually we are going to use one common shared disk, number one. That means we have two servers over here, okay, and they are going to host some of the service. It might be your DFS, it might be your website, anything. Okay, these two computers are having identical information, but these informations are not stored in these two computers. These informations are actually stored in some other third computer. It might be DC or any other device. Okay, the clustering is done over here. That means these two computers are using the commonly shared hard disks of this cluster. That means when the informations are being updated, informations are not updated in these two servers. Their information is actually stored in a cluster over here. It's a one device. Okay, we are going to access the space from this hard disk. Let's say the simple example is your iSCSI, because iSCSI can be used as a part of your failover cluster specific over here. So that means space is being used from this computer. It might be DC or any other this device. Now both of the computers are going to access the space from this hard disk. That means if this computer goes down, still the clients are going to be able to access their data via this server. Though I would like to focus over here, though the data is stored over here in a cluster. Of course, you might be wondering, but when the clients were accessing the data, okay, from this computer, and all of a sudden this server goes down, then how does the client know that now the IP of that server is changed like a 51 over here, because previously they were accessing from the 52? Don't worry, when we configure the cluster, in configuring a cluster, we do not use any of these IPs. We use one virtual IP, and that IP is actually mapped over through this. Of course, the space is over here. By the time we configure the failover cluster, we'll come across one step where you are going to configure one virtual IP in our case actually. So that virtual IP is equal for this computer as well as this computer. That means whenever client is going to access the data, they are not going to use the IP address of any of these two computers. We are going to use different cluster IP. So similarly, over here, okay, over here in network load balance also we are going to have the same mechanism. We'll be using one cluster IP actually. So every time client hits to get access over the ABC or AXYZ server for any web services, that IP is not the actual IP of these two computers actually. They are the pointing IPs only. So we are going to use one cluster IP. Okay, so I do believe that I clearly explained the meaning of these three things. What are the three things? Network load balance, failover, and failover cluster. Let's wrap up again. Network load balance means the load of two servers are actually balanced. Okay, it is to balance the load. That means you have two servers and 2000 clients, and 2000 clients are not going to have access or hit only one particular server all the time in order to access any kind of resource. It might be in the form of your file server, or it might be in the form of your web access, or it might be any website. And this failover means it's a kind of your additional domain, this mechanism where there is no cluster, to be honest. Okay, when the primary, your server goes down, the secondary server will be activated immediately. And the third one is a failover cluster. Okay, now over here clustering is done actually. Failover mechanism is used but with the cluster, and for this also we are using one cluster IP. Here I would like to show you one interesting fact about this network load balance. Let's say when I was talking about this network load balance, see, this is the client. When he hits xyz.com, it will come to the DNS round robin, it will redirect to this server. Okay, now again this computer hits, it might go over here. That means we are having two different IPs actually. One is a cluster IP is already there. Okay, but via that cluster IP we are redirected to this different server. That means these two web servers are existed over there. So if I want to show you the practical implementation of this network load balance, let's take an example of using or trying to see, I'm trying to show you how the network load balance works actually, okay, in your, let's say, Google server. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to see my IP. Okay, I don't have to show my one. So let's go to NS lookup before that, let's do it this one, google.com. Okay, it's gonna respond with the one IP. This is the IP address that we're getting. Okay, that means from my organization, if there are 500 clients, they are going to get the resource being accessed using the same this server IP. That means this server is going to get heavily loaded by only my request, request from my organization. That might be more than a 5 client, for instance. But how about we practically want to see that every server is going to have your network load balance. Now network load balance means they are going to have different servers, and when we talk about the different servers, there are different IPs. Okay, so I'd like to show you that practically. Let's do it this one. I'm going to show you your NS lookup for your failover, okay, in case of your Google. So let's say type is equals to NS, okay, then I'm going to show type is equals to NS. See, these all are the different servers actually. That means you don't think that whenever you hit google.com, they are going to get respond only from the one server. They are having so many servers actually. When the one server is heavily loaded, it might go to the next one. When the one server goes down, it might be redirected to the next server. So all of these servers are having different IPs actually. I would like to show you this practically. See, I'm going to ping the first server of the Google, ns1.google.com. You see it will respond with one particular IP address. Whereas if I ping the second server, ns2.google.com, you'll find the different IP address. You see, first one was 3210, last 2 octets, and the second one is 34.10. So this shows that every web service that we find over the cloud, okay, every DNS, every server, actually they are having your network load balance mechanism. So I do believe it was a bit informative and you understood what are the meaning of this network load balance, failover and failover cluster. In my upcoming video, I am going to upload the practical implementation how to set up the network load balance. If you find it fruitful, please do like and subscribe. Thank you.